Okay, let us continue this series of podcasts. And I do hope that you will also listen to podcast number 1, because even though I'm giving them different headlines, they are part of a sequence of information that will constitute a pattern of information that will lead to a broader understanding of some of the holographic complex information systems that we are to learn to work with. And the reason why I'm using that terminology is because when we begin to create a light body that goes into the 5th dimension, we are working with complex information systems and patterns of change from where we understand the use of symbols, we understand the use of energy, and we understand the ability to create new architecture from where we can begin to build new features into our physical forms. So that's part of that. And the Colontics, as part of the cell activation cycle, actually try to teach their group of Syrian bees lineages that were left inside this reality field how to do so. And we also recall from Alex Collier that he said the reason why the Andromedans from the constellation of Andromeda visited him was because he had been shot down in some of the wars that's been going on here, and then got stuck, because when you get killed inside a reality field, you are then reborn, so to speak. You get part of its cycles of existence, which we call the reincarnation cycles, but the reincarnation cycles are part of the enslavement program and therefore not the original way. So one way to get into a reality field and become part of it is to enter and then die there. And I recall when I needed to do some scientific work in the Draco system, in the D10 level, I had this, I was my craft, literally a huge craft. I was my craft. And then I needed to get land, set on land, or whatever you want to call it. Sorry, I don't know what the word should be, because when you are a craft and you are this plasma craft, and it is tangible, but you are inside it and you're not really physically walking from one area of the craft to another, but it still has features so that you can, if I kind of need it, I could manifest an organic form inside my craft using the energies of the craft, because the craft and I were one. And then when I was ready to enter the D10 plane of existence, which would call the worlds under the Dracos, that used to be human, by the way, and used to be part of the 4th density civilizations, which 4th density is technically the core domain, but they were part of the lineages that came and sprung into this universal structure. On a D10 level, that's where they decided to take form, and they used to be humans, but they regressed later on due to wrongful use of energy and consciousness. Anyway, that's a long story I'm not going to go into, but they lost track of who and what they really were. And I traveled there as part of a science project, and I manifested myself out of my craft energies. And then it was like I took the entire craft and just compromised it into becoming my vessel. So there was no craft in the sky. I left nothing up there, but it became me. It was this, when you are working with holographic principles and density energies, you can expand things and contract things, and you can travel the holographic ley lines, if you like, the network, the lattice, reality field network that is there. You can travel that one. That's why I can do 90-degree turns and all sorts of weird operating features when we look at some of the drone technology that we're seeing inside our reality field, doing these 9 degrees shift. And when I say drones, I'm not talking military drones. I'm talking or common people drones. I'm talking about advanced technology of the exosystemics that are upholding this enclosure, which is an artificial construction in the artificial construction, with this drone technology. And I will call it drones because it's unmanned. So we call it unmanned UFOs or unmanned type of technology that are weaving and upholding the enclosure, ensuring the holographic. Whenever there's a gap, one of these drone vessels come out. The one that's called the Tic Tac is one of these weavers. Like, you have a loom where this kind of thing goes back and forth and weaves artificially or by hand in the old days, but now artificially weaving the fabric. That's what these Tic Tacs are doing, that they are weaving the network that keeps up the construction that we're part of. And you say, well, they're only out on the ocean, and that's because we are still not really grasping the significance of the fourth dimension being present in the ocean, and by that are able, as they get gaps there, they can weave it there, and from that then it gets into the network and then being latched into symbols that are placed around our planet. And some of these symbols have become visible in what we call crop circles, right? So that's there. They are then receiving the energy from the weavers, and with that are maintaining the construction that we know of. And then you say, well, is it now that we go out and demolish all crop circles? Well, they are just the physical manifestation of some of the symbols that are in the network that is upholding our planetary feature. So our planet is artificially upheld by what we call holographic overlay. So if that goes, then we will flatten out, not become flat all Earth, but become a reality field as it's supposed to. And then it has similar, we actually don't have that either. It looks like when we're out in space, we're looking at our planet, it looks as if there's some kind of perimeter around our planet, but there isn't, because it's just different types of energies that extends out. The same with our body. It appears to be that this is locally oriented, and our body between our hand and the room that we're in, there is a difference there because it looks different, right? But it's the same type of electromagnetic energy. We are composed of the same quantum atom molecular matter, and even though that the space around us is not molecular in an organic way, it's definitely molecular in what we call a matter way, composing reality as we know of it. And still, whatever we are perceiving due to the way our brain is calibrated. If you shift a frequency spectrum, you will see something else, including the limitations of our eyesight that goes within the visible spectrum. Everything beyond that we can't see. So what we're seeing is what our brains are being engineered to only perceive, and that is also upheld by different program cubes that are controlling what we perceive and how we process information, and how our body electrochemically respond to the information that we are looking at and are detecting out there. So that's some of the things that the new reality programs as well will try to change, so that those of us who do have the genetic ability to go into density energies and work holographically with complex information systems are now beginning to get that type of information. This program's been running for some 20 years, but mostly after 2011, where they began integrating the event program. The maintainers actually took part of that. And then in 2018, it got completely integrated into our reality in the Easter event of 2018, where they began to push out the lunars, and that was kind of the nail in the coffin of the lunar hierarchy, which we know as the planetary hierarchy under the old lunar masters that were part of the refugee group that came with the moon in the times of Atlantis, and then became part of some of what we call the groups that worked with the colonizing races and became some of the priesthoods inside this reality field, and were still operating with what we could call some of the old elder races of the different groups of colonizers to try and upgrade humanity. But we could say without a shred of a doubt that the esoteric teaching systems and New Age has not succeeded in that endeavor. The fourth cycle has not been reached. The LSA Bailey material, the Blavatsky material, even though Blavatsky is of the third cycle, but the Bailey material was supposed to get people there. Not even close. Not even close. So their 100-year cycles for them should have been completed in 2025, and we were supposed to be now all in full cycle, completely awake and aware. Didn't really go that well because they had not factored in the machine worlds that got access to our reality field in the 50s due to some of the old bloodlines that in America that wanted more power. And I'm going to say it as it is, because it were the Americans that invited them in, the 1952 flyover, right? So that were some of the covert military operations that decided, we want to have our fingers in the alien technology. And that's also one of the reasons when we talk about the UFO community and researchers, quite a lot of them are from America, because they are dealing with the machine worlds and the technocrats and the parallel universal matrix races to a higher degree than we are at other places on the planet. But other places on the planet, we are dealing with the colonizers and the ones that took over reality fields some 15,000 years ago, and their decay and they're falling apart. So nothing is easy peasy here. Everything is complex, and a different jurisdiction, different groups, different races coming in and out using the gate systems. And as our joint field of energy diminishes and tumbles downwards to the abyss and the third cycle, all gate systems are opening up. The first one that deliberately was open was in the 9/11 event that opened up a wormhole. So with that, to use that expression, into some of the very old levels of our reality field, again, to get more power, right? Using alien technology. Again, my best take is that was a bit of a trickery going on there, but not the people that were involved in that did not really know what they were doing and what they actually opened up for. But with that, gave access to things into our reality field that would be the thumbs up for the dark ones, so they could come in and overshadow and become part of the human vessels. That was the attempt. But a thumbs down for the parallel universal matrix. So there we had a bit of a power kick back and forth in America, as well as with the stellar activation cycle, the attempts of the Syrian beast to try and drum up a group of people to work with the original energies of what we call the fifth dimension to try and counter the dark forces and push them back. Not succeeding either. So whenever humans have been tried to being drum up to do what we're actually supposed to be able to do, it kind of gets lost in all sorts of human emotionality and human preferences and partnerships and children, and not ready to let go of the tribal mentality. And so things just falls apart, which it did with the Klontics as well. When they were done, they blasted it apart, separated the whole community by coming out with allegations of abuse and violence and all sorts of things between the two leading members. And I'm pretty sure she was convinced that that was what had happened, because it is easy to manipulate human mind. One of the researchers back in the 2014-15, I can't remember, Sarah McDonald, I think is her name. I can't remember. It's part of the if you go into the USAF member list of UFO researcher, she's also a regressionist. She talks about how some of her clients can be altered. She had one client she calls Michael. That is not his name, but that's just his client name. So we can talk about him without breaching the client confidentiality. So she talks about Michael there and how he was completely hetero, straight guy. And then the Greys decided, let's try and see if we can actually do this shift of gender. And that's kind of the earlier attempt to try and see if they could alter the gene pool to be oriented towards the YX. And with that, naturally, should be to the original breeder worker programs configured to want to connect to an XX human to breed offspring. And then overnight literally turned him into gay and make him homosexual. And he lived with another guy for a couple of years. And then they decided, that's kind of enough. And then they switched him back. And then from one day to another, he was not gay anymore and he had to leave his partner because, sorry, it's not really who I am. And I will say I've suffered from that kind of technology myself, being connected to a male in Australia, which were not connected to me in the same way, but that was part of some of the experimentation that's been going on. And I think many of you that were part of the twin soul programs or the twin flames, you were latched into or hooked onto what we call a partner that had a configuration that technically need to be healed, and you had a greater light potential and your partner had a smaller light potential, and the whole attempt was to merge the two architectures, the two template or energy systems, so that your higher viability would repair your partners. And that's why they call it the twin flame, and they came up with this whole, you have been divided, and the Atlantics talked about that as well. But in my personal experience and my some of the things I've been dealing with when I was in Australia came under that program, and I was merged with a male that were not interested in me in whatsoever in that way. And that's part of the plot, so that there will be no happy partnership, but it will be under distress and pain and suffering and all sorts of things, as an attempt to undo the Y chromosome and the link up to the dark ones and the Leviathan racial networks that were imbued with what we call infected energies of the timeline event. So that's some of the things that the humanoids are struggling with. The reseeding, that's where we kind of got the XX chromosome as we know of it. So females are technically a new breed inside this reality, re-engineered for the reseeding. And we're not supposed to breed children to begin with, but that were some of the things that were taken over when we got hijacked 15,000 years ago. We got that. Having the fourth cycle configuration of before the fall of Atlantis and the fourth cycle configuration after the fall of Atlantis, we were supposed to breed the offspring, engineer via our bodies little mini humans that would then carry the correct type of genetic imprint and architecture by birth, and not by complicated incubation, recreation, recalibrating, replicates in the artificial fourth, then seeded in. So that's were part of the original breeder program. And to get that to be able to do so are some of the secrets that are stuck in the female genome or the XX genome, which those of us who are clearing that one out, we will discover as we go deeper and deeper into a molecular state. We will see, that's how it came to be. I got the uterus. Not something I want to keep, really. Not that we're going to do a hysterectomy and go and get rid of it. But again, move our orientation from understanding that some of the programs we have been under, what we have romanticized to be gender specific, are part of re-engineering that has been done to the original humans and humanoids that coexist inside the enclosure. And our first step of recreating and what we truly are is to understand, are we humanoids or are we true human or progressive humans? Not that this is against each other, but it all comes down to the D13 or D14 collective. What were our original purpose as part of the original lineages, and how do we correctly work with our energy system so that we don't create distortion? Because it all comes down to that. We're not working correctly with our energy system and our genetic composition. Distortion is created, and distortion is what breaks us down. Organic decomposition happens because of distortion of energy. So if we're not working in alignment with our true template structure and what we were originally and our true consciousness potentials, our energy system will be in what we call dissonance all the time. And dissonance creates chaos, and chaos creates distortion. And as we do so, we get susceptible for the distortion energies of our reality field, because our reality field and us are interconnected. So if we are distorted, so will our world be. And that's one of the energetic reasons from what we call the higher order energy viewpoint of why we are having the collapse right now, is because we have not only distorted our own architecture, but we have also distorted our reality field using the racial energies and the holographic networks in wrongful ways, because we have not maintained ourselves. And you can say, well, when the hijackers came and took over 15,000 years ago, was that their agenda so they could take it over? And that's the big question. Was it so? Or did they just say, well, it's already on the brink of fall because it's close to the abyss and it is the enclosure and was part of a restoration program that were recreated out of the Pillar Project after the timeline event? That's my take on it. And it was created as a quarantine zone. Well, let us dump whoever we can't use in our own reality fields there. Some of them there are semi-eternal. Let's dump them there, keep them in the reincarnational cycles, and then they are off our hands and they will decompose and fall into the abyss. So that's part of the enslavement program, as well as the imprisonment, as well as the incarcerations. Now you begin to understand, okay, so enslavement is casualty of war. Imprisonment is the ones that have done something in the other reality fields and don't know what to do with this semi-eternal being. Dump it here, put it in a human vessel and wipe him and put him in the reincarnational cycle so he will never remember what he is, because mainly it's males of that orientation. But unfortunately, as energies are rising up, they are beginning to become what they truly are. So we're going to have a problem with these souls, let's just call them that are in human forms that were dumped here. Old warrior, re-engineering, hybrids from some of the Orion Wars nobody wanted, put into human form here, thought they would be kept in kind of walking around stasis. Not so much. Okay, and then we have the incarceration that is mainly when we go back to when we had the tourists or the 1,000-year extraterrestrial that were here. And when they got pissed with some of their bloodlines, they incarcerated them, they cursed them, they kind of created this offspring that were semi-eternal, and they just didn't do what they wanted to do with their sons and daughters. Yeah, we incarcerate them and then put them again into that type of human. So the original human form that we have, or part of the enslavement, has been used into different variations as imprisonment or incarceration. So we have, and they are sealed off, heavily sealed off. I saw that in my template readings in 2015 and 16, where some of the extra systemics began teaching me about, okay, this is what's actually going on. So this is the work that you need to do as a releaser and a retriever. These are the things you need to clean up. So that's where I draw my information from. The work I've been doing, the things I've been seeing, the things I encountered, the pockets of shells that needs to be cleared as an attempt to keep this reality field going. But as always, you can only do so much. And eventually these races, they pulled out most of the time when they handed over their old technology and whatever they had left here is because they took over and then left it for me to clean it up, so to speak. Since with under the saying, well, you come from the councils, you are here to clean up the pillar project, so this is what it has become. This is technically what you were part of creating, so that's your responsibility. So here you go, handing it back over. It's giving over. Yeah, we took your technology, we took your programs, we took whatever you were part of creating with your lineage, and yeah, we completely destroyed it and dumped it and dismantled it and created all sorts of things of it that shouldn't have been created, but that's your problem. Here you go. You wanted it back. There you go. You claim it. That's yours, but also yours to clean up. And then standing with that, like someone kind of, you live in a little flat, and then someone, one day you get 10 large trucks coming out in front of your door and loading of furniture and all sorts of shit from houses around. They say, I don't know, that's not mine. Yeah, sorry about that, dude or girl. That's your ancestors. They used to have these houses, but they're no longer there, and you're the last standing of that ancestral lineage. So therefore, that's yours. You own this. We have sold the houses, they're completely dismantled, and we're taking over the land, but the interior, yours to keep. Here you go. So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. And not particularly funny. It's been a 24-hour, all going, all day cleanup of these timelines and old technologies and what remains of horrible projects that's been going on these timelines due to the invading or hijacking races and their attempt to restore their own genetic compositions, using the human form to do so as well, including clones and replicates in the artificial fourth dimension. So we are having quite a lot of struggle and problems. So that's where I'm talking from. And I know others out there don't have that perception. And we all have our own understanding of the world that we are part of, and that is called relative reality perception. And it all comes down to our consciousness potentials, our genetics, and our original lineage, and why we're here and what our original participation of the original reality field, our solar system, were to begin with. That determines what we see, what we perceive, and what we are now dealing with as part of our cleanup, activation, and cleanup processes, which you will call ascension and karma, which I don't. But karma, the cleanup of what we have been doing inside this reality field. Ascension is the elevation. If we clean up enough of where we're connected to, we will then release the anchor that keeps us stuck in the past, get into the now, reconfigure ourselves, and get ready to move into the worlds that we either came from or the futures that we choose to be part of, whether it will be in the end cycles, because there's a couple of 5,000 to 10,000 years left in this solar system before it goes into becoming a cold world, so to speak. The sun will still be there, but when I say 5 to 10 years, you'll say, is it in human time? 5,000 to 10,000 years. Sorry about that. It doesn't match what science tells us. They're saying, oh, the sun will not burn out until blah, 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 millions and zillions of years into the future. But the science said the same thing. Oh, yeah, we'll not have the climate crisis or the breakdown of the weather system before in 2022 or 160 or something, far 100, 200 years into the future. And now we're already having it within 5 years. And that's part of the new, due to the elevation cycles of the other universal structures that are rising up in vibration, and that ripples into ours so that we can activate and clean up and follow the highway out, either as part of the original density and middle domain gate systems, using our holographically recreated light body to do so, either as an orb if we do it from the fourth, or as a more restructured light body if we do it in the fifth cycle, or the middle domain of the middle domain, if you like. The first domain is the fourth cycle, the middle domain is the fifth, and the top domain of the middle domain is the sixth cycle. So that's kind of how that one goes. When we talk about root races inside our reality, the whatever you find of information out there is from the Great White Brotherhood and their attempt to reseed new types of humans. But as I said, their programs have not succeeded. So there will not be a new seeding of the sixth root race in America, just to put it in that way. But there will be a parallel universal matrix, incoming humanoids that are going to merge with existing humans that have what we call genetic similarity, and then overlay and overlap their energy systems and link them up to fields, host fields that are being merged or blended into the reality field network of the whole, what we could call it must be the East Coast, right? Florida is east. Sorry about that. Or is it's sorry about that. Forget that. Geography, human things, when I'm thinking which one is right or west or whatever, which direction are you standing, right? The whole San Andreas fault, that whole version over there with California, but there are also, NOAA worked on the other side with what we call the whole out to the Atlantic ocean. We are having the ones that goes out to the Pacific Ocean, and we have the ones that goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. The ones that goes out to the Atlantic Ocean are the ones that try to recreate New Atlantis on that way, and that was NOAA. And then you have to the other side, to the South Pacific, they were trying to recreate what we could call the Syrian A version of the root races. So just to put it that way, that's an easier way for me to orient it when I look at the map from outside. Because again, when you're standing, which front are you facing when we're talking about, is it east or west or whatever? These kind of north, east, west, and south are the four corners of our world, and that's built upon a magnetic field that are oriented in a specific way. But since our Earth has been retilted and we're therefore going into a different configuration and a different spin, that means the old up and down and left and right are no longer as they were supposed to, but that's part of the blending to the parallel universal matrix. So we go into their spin by having tilted our planet to spin in the opposite direction. And that's the blend of these fields that are coming in. And they are going from the South Pacific in and chewing away America until they got the entire American continent, linked up to the parallel universal matrix. And then they're going to do the blend, where they will supersede technically, oversee or overlay, or however you want to put it, humans that have an energy system that is capable of doing so. And many of them have been, to use that expression, groomed for quite some time to be able to carry these new energy systems that will be merged in and will be like a secondary personality, which many will perceive as their higher selves. And then that new configuration, it's a semi-replicated form of energy system, will then overlay the existing human and then work within that human for 5 to 10 years, recalibrate the entire genetic composition, which will feel like an upgrading for people that are under these programs. And then in 10 years' time, that entire configuration, including genetics and life force, will then be pulled out and returned into a replicate that is now in stasis in the parallel universal matrix. And via that, the human form inside this reality field will be left with absolutely nothing. And that's, from as I see it, all of the projects that's been going on in America has always been 10 times worse than what's been going on in the rest of the world. And that's also some of the intel I got from the exosystemics. They always kind of say, yeah, we're not doing the American way. We're doing it in a different way, so to speak. But that's because the parallel universal matrix, they need an enormous amount of genetics to be able to maintain their artificial construction. So that's some of the things they are working on. So again, with whatever's going on in our reality field, wherever we are, it depends on what we were originally. It depends on the choices we have made in this lifetime. And relative reality still stands. So no matter what's happening in our joint reality field, it's always possible to segregate in a positive manner by recalibrating our energy system to be in alignment with a different set of understandings and a different set of dynamics and a different way of working with information. So that's one of the reasons why I created the progression work. And I know there's an enormous amount of course material to go through, but that's because I am literally giving my very best to create all levels of what we call, as close as possible to the original Pillar Project energy system configuration, that were as an attempt after the timeline event to undo the effects of the timeline event before the fall of Atlantis, and recalibrate using some of the ancient technologies of the 12 Sisters network, as well as some of what we call the more progressive races under this of the Syrian races, but technically they're under the solar reaches. So this is a group of Syrian genetics that is not Syrian A, it's not Syrian B, it's part of the White Elder Strand. And they participated in some of the original projects. But later on, that group of Syrians deviated and fell under some of what we call the D11 Vega collective, and then became the Vega Syrians. And they are technically the originators of the Anunnaki. So there we have this. I know many are saying, oh, the Anunnaki goes to D10. Yeah, we have two versions of Anunnaki. Again, remember, we have the top level, a Trinity, then we have Enlil and Enki. And Enki is the one that went with the Dracos, and Enlil is the one that went with the Vega branch, and have what we call avian, mammal, humanoid composition, whereas Enki has a Draco, avian, and mammal, so reptoid in that manner. So these are two different sublings of the original Syrian vegan humanoid, which many of you know as Anu. Okay. So we are dealing with this understanding of things that have gone wrong and things that we need to not make amends for, but recreate and restructure. And that's all part of the process of working with complex information systems. It's all part of understanding the purposes and function of who and what we are. And it's all about the correct terminology, because words are sounds, and sounds should have a function and not just be these empty words, like love, for instance. That's the most empty word there exists. if we would truly go into the understanding of what's being said when people are connecting to what we say some of the older versions of themselves, most of the time they just plunge right into another false spiritual overlay program where they get all this love sensation, is actually an energetic parasite that releases a specific type of enzyme into the heart field. And then people think, oh, this is where I need to go. But it is a parasite. Energetic parasite, again, linked up to programs that will keep people stuck in the reincarnational cycles. So when we do talk about becoming part of the progressive races that are working for the highest good of the many to recreate the light body that will allow us to travel on the networks between the different systems, and that goes back to the craft I talked about in the previous video, which kind of I was talking about how to get into a reality field and I kind of reshaped myself from a craft and then taking on a human form. And the first thing I experienced when I entered was that I got killed. And with that, I got stuck in the D10 system for quite some time, and I had to work my way out of there. And the same with us that are inside this reality field. And I think that's one of the reasons why why I have agreed to, there are many different reasons why I'm here. And I know to a large degree I've been traveling in and out without being under the council, what you call directive, but do it on a personal level because I kind of had a little bit of a buff with my own lineage and some of the things that's been going on here, trying to clean up the mess. Because I knew before for a long time, that it would go wrong here due to the wrongful use of energy and consciousness. It only has one path once it goes into a power struggle and a wrongful use of energy that creates distortion. If people don't correct, if people don't get back onto the true ways of working with energy and transforming energy and undoing the contamination and the distortion that are in their fields, contamination of their genetics and distortion of their energy fields, well, then there is only one way, and that's entropy, that's chaos. And the more chaos, the more disordinance, the more, distortion. And by that, the more regression. And by more regression, the more distortion, etc. It's a vicious circle that continues. And once that spiral has kicked in, there is only one gate left, and that's the one into the abyss as decomposed matter and energy system and consciousness units that in the abyss will cease to exist entirely. That's what the abyss is. That's where it's in the nothingness. Nothing exists there. Everything, it's like you have this gate, this black hole where dust turns into nothing. And your mind can't really grasp nothingness, but that is nothingness as the great opposition to the infinity field. So we kind of have the continued existence that spawns and emits new lineages that takes force in the universal matrices or the universal structures. But at the bottom of all of these, they have their version of the abyss. That's where things get flushed out when it's no longer viable. So things can cease to exist. Nothing is eternal. That's why I call it semi-eternal. The only thing that goes on forever is the infinity field. The rest of us, we are being spawned into different universal structures. We are doing what we need to do. We do our choices. We keep on the different domains. We work our way out to the outer domain. And the outer domain we shed off using the abyss for our advantage. What is no longer viable and what we no longer have use of. And all the things that we have kind of done wrong, as in distorted, and where we have misused our original purpose and our original functionality, we go to the outer domain, we are drawn there, and in the outer domain, we take a couple of cycles where we get ourselves sorted, and then we return back to the middle domain and continue our work. So the outer domain has always been kind of where we have science stations, where we kind of had projects going on. If something went wrong in the middle domain, we positioned it in the outer domain. And so with the LPU, the Less Progressive Universal Matrix, as well as the Pillar Project that were recalibrated and shifted from the middle domain to the outer domain after the timeline event. And with that became part of the restoration program, because there we could then easily get rid of things. If they got too infected, they would be naturally sucked into the abyss, until we got a problem with the dark ones, which then created an what we call an alter gate. using the blue light technology of the Maldakian system, and then they began sucking in before they reached the abyss, and then they took over the scraps, and with that became some very, very weird beings that I'm also struggling with these semi-decomposed genetics. They took them and recreated themselves from being mere shadows into becoming different forms, life forms that are of a hybrid. They are more chimeras. That would be the right version there. Hybrids, chimera, technically the same. You can say it's two different orientations. Hybrids are engineered to be what we call genetically manipulated, crossing different types of racial lineages, whereas the chimeras are what is coming out of something that is patched together using unnatural means and keeping themselves together, again, using symbols and sounds and what we call magic to get what they need to maintain themselves. So there you began to understand some of the things that went wrong with the priesthoods of Atlantis as they began to adhere to the Dark Ones, being told that they would get enormous amount of power by it. So, and the Atlanteans were already onto the hybrid project. So we are, it's not, when we look back, let's not romanticize anything in this reality. And I think that's one of the first steps when we are talking about the advanced technologies in our system and our original races that used to be here. We are having a series of events where there have been a minority that have made decisions on our behalf, sometimes with the allowance from the councils, at other times just doing it because they thought it was interesting. And that has had this ripple effect into destroying entire reality fields where we have what we say 90% innocence that are now struggling and have come under different programs that they in no way or form chose on their own. But since they were not up to what came their way and did not understand what was coming their way, which we're seeing repeated now. 90% of whatever's inside this enclosure now repeating their denial processes, their not readiness to look at things and see them as they truly are, not really understanding what's coming their way. And that's why I'm doing my time to do this series, as I'm kind of saying, okay, here, now I know what I know. This is with my own telepathic and holographic encounters. This has come from my clearing work. This is, I work with the lowest of the lowest, the shittiest of the shittiest, the level of reality most people don't even want to be part of, and I don't want either, but they were part of the original Pillar Project, and hence my responsibility, as if you are driving a firm or having a firm or a company, and then you have some kind of huge genetic remodification due to some kind of atomic bomb or whatever, and all of your co-workers turn into weird zombies and weird stuff. You're still the boss of them. They were in your building when it happened, and you still have to take care of them. You still have to figure out, can they be recreated and re-engineered or put back together? Or how do we deal with this? How do we make insurance plans and contingency plans and healthcare plans for these co-workers that used to be brilliant, functional, advanced beings that were co-working and coexisting and working in teams to recreate what we call the next step of the lineages that we all came from as part of the original Pillar Project. So it is my responsibility. They may not be what they used to be, but they are still linked to the Pillar Project that I were part of the group of creating and administering it. So it's still under my responsibility, and hence why coming back and why going in and doing what needs to be done as part of that group that used to work with me in the Pillar Project. So, and this is just a different way of saying others have used the same, but in a reversed way, and saying, oh yeah, we are your father and your mother, we are your lineage, we are your brethren, and we are your galactic family and all these kind of things. And most of these, they go with the refugees and the colonization that happened during the times of Atlantis. And they technically were not part of the Pillar Project. They just came in because the Solar Riches and the Progressive Councils decided that that was an attempt that should be done to lift what we call the fourth cycle, Lemurians, into the fifth cycle by giving them infusions of other types of civilizations and linking us up to the middle domain that has a different type of gate systems that goes with the galactic level, as I said. So that's some of the things that went wrong in Atlantis, and also one of the reasons why we had hybrid projects and all sorts of things that we are seeing repeated inside this world today. So we are repeating history over and over and over and over again because we haven't learned our lessons. Huge groups of people are repeating their denial defense systems. I'm not seeing this because it's too intimidating, it's too scaring, it's too demanding, it's too whatever. So I'd rather just pretend it's not there, and do the three monkeys and blah, 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 blah. I'm not seeing anything, not hearing anything, I'm not understanding anything. Then we have the group of Atlantis. This is kind of, oh yeah, I want to do the fifth dimension. I want to get my powers back. I want to levitate. I want to get all of what I could do with magic and blah, going down the dark path one more time and reactivating their Y chromosome and getting linked back up to the Leviathan. And the more they do so, the darker they become. And I can detect these humans, and unfortunately, most of them are actually males. Y chromosome. Then we have the XX chromosome humans that are still stuck in the tribal communities, twin soul, twin flames, ascension, romanticized version of whatever, floating happily, gracefully into the fifth dimension, and everything will be taken care of, and I'll return to source, and I'll come back home, and I'll be part of God, and God will be part of me, and I'll be the new maiden that will be in service of source, and I will do what my heart tells me, becoming the new nun in whatever. I don't know how that works, but there is a little bit of old temple priestess orientation in these females, let's just put it that way, of some of the later stages of Atlantis. Again, being connected to some superior extraterrestrial, and they are typically females of the bloodline. So they are doing that one. And then we are having other males or YX that are more X-oriented of the bloodlines as well, that are trying to struggle with spirituality and their Y chromosome, the dark forces, and having this internal strife with whatever's going on of different entities and what they're seeing, wanting to have power, or do they want to take responsibility? Are they going to be part of a community, or they're going to stand sovereign in their own work? Are they loners? Are they group people? All of these psychological processes, which we have barely begun to scratch the surface of. And once I'm kind of done with the fifth cycle technology, my plan is definitely to go into create what we call the fifth cycle psychology, because we're going to have new psychological features that will surface. And I also worked as a healer and psychotherapist since 2007. So that's not working as a healer anymore. That kind of ended in 2017, but due to the incoming races and the manipulation that most healers are under when they actually try to help others, because it also is so when we talk the true progression work, nobody can get you anywhere but you. You're the only one that can repair and reconstruct yourself. You're the only one that can build the complex information patterns. And you're the only one that can restore who and what you are by your everyday life, by your everyday feeling, and by your everyday thinking. Transforming your emotional field to the vibrational field, transforming your brain field to the mind field and the radiation field, transforming your perception of reality from the base program to the advanced original civilizations and the true galactic history and the true knowledge of who and what you are and why you're here. And the only one that can get you out of either incarceration or imprisonment or enslavement is by you working with your energy system, getting rid of the regressed genetics, the inserted technologies, the prohibiting programs, the prohibiting technologies, and the different fields that are inserted into your energy system that keeps you locked down and attached to timelines that are under these different colonizing races, of which many have left. So you should be able to release yourself and claim sovereignty by doing the work on the timelines. But of course, if nobody's doing that work, then these timelines are being consumed by either the dark ones, the technocratic worlds, or the parallel universal matrix races. We are up against time here. And literally, I mean time, because our Earth is spinning in a different direction. We are being sucked into the parallel universal matrix, the dark worlds, or whatever's going on, the technocratic worlds. And the only way out to do the transition is to shift into a holographic setting that allows us to work with the original networks of our reality field, although they are also highly damaged. But once we learn to transform our own energy system and deal with whatever is there and the technology, we can also transform and transmute whatever we will encounter in our work as we transition out of this system by our own doing, by our own clearing work, by our own energy work, by our own reconstruction work, and by our own remembering who and what we are and taking responsibility for who and what we are so that we can become what we were supposed to be in the fifth cycle. Thank you.